The Silmarillion by Tolkien. I'm now up to the chapter called The Beginning of Days, which is actually the first chapter of Quinta Silmarillion proper. There's so much in this chapter. We're still at the point where everything is just this massive bird's eye view kind of storytelling structure. We haven't yet zoomed in particularly on many characters, which I assume we will do once we get to the elves and the next chapter, which looks like it's going to focus on Aule and Yavanna. But we're still at the point where there's just like so much information to take in, and it's a little bit like an encyclopedia, but I love it so much. There's actually so much in it. So, Beginning of Days. We pick up where we left off essentially, which was the first war. So the first war basically ends with Melkor getting like semi-permanently banished from Middle-earth and going to like beyond I think it's called the Night Wall, or the Wall of Night, Void of Night. Largely Tulkas's doing, which is interesting because Tulkas doesn't really come up much in terms of like the might hierarchy. Like I'm pretty sure it was Melkor, then Manwë, then Ulmo, in terms of like how strong Ilúvatar made them, but Tulkas, because he's one of the actual war gods, if you could call him that, seems that he's just particularly good at waging war, so it doesn't matter how strong he is. And I kind of like that. I like it how each god in their domain, it doesn't matter if technically on a like pure brute power level they're not as powerful, but if it's a war, then Tulkas will have the upper hand. If it is in the vein of creating new life, green life, then Yavanna would have the upper hand. I do wonder then what actual domain is Melkor's. Manipulation, like fire? It just feels a bit mean that fire is often the evil element just because it burns and destroys. Like we couldn't cook meat without fire. His domain is definitely going to be like domination, selfishness, power control, and he's never going to win in that domain because that's Ilúvatar's. So basically the Valar begin to live complacently, and I'm reminded of that quote, hard times create strong men create good times, and good times create weak men. So we're at the good times creating weak men, or like peaceful times create complacent Ainur, and weak men create hard times. So we're at the point where they're basically not setting themselves up to win another war. They're just making these two big lamps, all of the beautiful greenery, and they're getting married, getting it on, I assume. Who is it that gets married? Not married, but like Tulkas espoused Nessa, the sister of Orome, and she danced before the Valar upon the green grass of Elmarin. Elmarin was the area that they favoured in Middle-earth before Middle-earth was broken. The raising of the lamps is a theory that really only works if this is a flat earth, which kind of made me laugh a little bit. So everyone here on Arda is a flat earther. I really love that Vada filled the lamps with light because she is the one who, you know, made all the stars. So it's like starlight in the lamps, which means that they're basically suns because the sun is a star. There's a beautiful line about Yavanna. But wealth there was of her imagining, and nowhere more rich than in the midmost parts of the earth where the light of both the lamps met and blended. So the children of the Ilúvatar have the elves have not come yet. You can imagine Manwë and Vada being like, do you remember those days before elves and men were on the earth? They were good days. No, they wouldn't have actually said that because they were excited. So Melkor sees them all partying and having a feast, and he didn't know what was going on. Kind of like when you are a sulking child and you get really annoyed at everyone, then you go away into a corner and sulk, expecting everyone else to also have a bad time because you're sulking, so no one else should enjoy it. And then when you go back to look at all your friends, they're having an even better time and it makes you feel even worse. This is what has happened to Melkor. So yeah, he really is a teenager child. So during the first war, he must have kept spies, planted spies, and people who were still loyal to him. Loyal by choice, loyal not by choice, it remains to be seen. But in either way, they have been converted to his cause. And far off in the darkness, he was filled with hatred, being jealous of the work of his peers, whom he desired to make subject to himself. So he saw all this from his spies who were getting back to him. You know, if I was one of Melkor's spies, I would just get all the other spies and be like, maybe don't say anything, just like, let's just keep this hush-hush for a bit. Don't think they had a choice. Anyway, now that I'm reading this, I've probably made a little bit of a mistake. I think that I humanized Melkor a little bit too much when I was reading the last 2 chapters, and I think I'm wrong about that. It's always a desire of me to try to humanize evil. I thought maybe he's a tortured soul, and he fell from grace. Really, maybe, I think that might be more true, I think, of the story of Sauron, but maybe not so much for Melkor. So I think that Melkor truly just wants to dominate, and it's actually relatively straightforward and as simple as that. There's no massive hurting thing underneath Melkor, and I think that what makes him so scary, because a lot of the time there's a part of me that's like, if he could just be reasoned with, if someone could just show him some sympathy or some compassion, he might come around. But I really don't think that is the case with Melkor. It might be with Sauron. That remains to be seen. Anyway, that's my current impression. Manwë kind of just lords. He's really like a symbol. He doesn't seem to do much of the work. He kind of sets himself up nicely and very occasionally just gets a little bit of thunder and lightning going in the sky to remind Melkor of his existence, but that seems to be about it. I've also come to the conclusion, it was previously mentioned, that Manwë was the one who most reflected Ilúvatar's desires in Arda, in Ea. And that was what Ilúvatar said. Now, or at least that's what Tolkien has read, told us that Ilúvatar said. I would say that actually no, Melkor is Ilúvatar's darling, but Ilúvatar specifically made sure Melkor overheard him say that no, it was Manwë that reflected his goals the most, in order to continue to shape and manipulate Melkor into how Ilúvatar wanted him to be. Ilúvatar wanted Melkor to continue in his downward spiral, and so the only way to do that was to potentially tell a little bit of a lie and say, actually, Manwë's my fave. So I think Ilúvatar is the grand manipulator for sure, and all of these are his chess pieces, all of these Valar. Middle-earth is not the middle of anything, it's the only earth, so I don't know why it's called Middle-earth. There's probably a reason. So Melkor comes back and the ferns begin to rot, which is how people know. I don't know why ferns rotting is sticking into my head, but it is. Rivers were choked with weeds and slime. Fens were made, rank and poison. But basically the plants started to die, and then majorly, big plot development, Melkor manages to bring down the lamps, which are obviously the symbol of the light and everything that's growing on Middle-earth. And that really freaks out the Valar. Like, they're just like, didn't see that coming. And I kind of agree. When I was reading Jeff Lasala's blog, which I'll link below, when he was commenting about this chapter, I agree that it seems kind of crazy that the Valar didn't see this coming. And he said that the reason for that is that not that they're dumb and didn't see it coming, but because they are purely good and they cannot actually conceive of an evil thought, then they couldn't predict evil. It's kind of like saying we cannot conceive of a colour we've never seen. So that's what it was like for the Valar, I suppose. They just didn't fathom that someone would be so vindictive that they would come back and tear the lamps down. And Tolkien would say that we know this as men because we are separate from the Song of Ainur, and we have this scary, crazy freedom, and we'll get to that. But overall, I still feel like the Valar need to lift their game. They even if you can't conceive of evil, you could logically say, well, this happened once, it could happen again. Melkor already has been screwing with you for ages. Like, it's gonna happen. And also because like 14 versus 1, and he makes so much. But I suppose if you're the god of manipulation and control, that kind of is your arena. So when it comes to subverting the plans and ideas of others, Melkor is going to shine in that area no matter what. No one else is a manipulator or a planner, save potentially, well, at least no one's a manipulator or planner for their own ends. I would definitely say that the character Aloran, I would say, is technically a manipulator, but in a good way. Interesting point about Nienna. I just think, how I was saying before, if someone just showed Melkor a little bit of sympathy, would that not be Nienna who did that? Who surely is the most likely out of all of the Valar to potentially be able to see things from Melkor's sorrow POV. But because she thrives on sorrow, she actually doesn't want to fix the situation, which is kind of screwed up. She thrives on, like, she knows, like, she's truly role-playing herself, and it's actually in her best interest to let things unfold as they are. She just kind of puts her hands in the air and lets all of this bad stuff happen. Knowing that because, you know, she also gives people a lot of strength through sorrow, that's where she comes through. She needs bad times to be powerful, Nienna. Anyway, so the spring, thus ended the spring of Arda, is what I'm getting at. And the Valar are freaking out because if the children of Ilúvatar appear right now, they've got nowhere to like coddle them and make them all nice and brush their hair, because all elves need to brush their hair multiple times a day. Maybe there's no wind in Valinor, but I don't know. Another interesting point, you know, why don't they just march on Melkor, just all of them? Why don't all of the Valar come straight to, what was the name of Melkor's stronghold in Middle-earth? Utumno. Why don't they go straight there? And the, you know, Aragorn brought an entire army to Mordor just to distract the eye so that Frodo could put the ring in the fire. He did that, but he is of man. So I definitely think that men blessed with this freedom to do what they want means they can do stuff like that. Whereas the Valar technically aren't free to stray away from the domains that they're in. Like, they're stuck in these little pods of special interests that Ilúvatar has given them, just like the elves. And so men are the only one that can really affect, I suppose, this like really intense change in a particular way. Valinor becomes even more beautiful than Middle-earth was in its heyday, apparently. Specifically, it's noted as a place of deathlessness, so nothing fades there, kind of like the Githyanki in the Astral Sea, right? No flower petals become brown or rotten, no one gets sick. It's like a paradise, but it would be hell if you were mortal, because if there's no changing or anything and you only have limited time, it would kind of suck if there was no changing. Like, you can't... A utopia where truly everything is perfect is a dystopia for the existential mortal, because you can't affect the change that you want to with the drive that you have as a mortal. But it sounds like a really beautiful place that you'd want to visit and go on to unwind and not have to worry. But to actually live your... like, it's like going on a holiday and reading a book on a beach for days and days on end. I can do it for like half a day and then I need to do something else and continue with interests and progressing otherwise. Valinor would actually be almost like a kind of hell if you actually wanted to do stuff. Everything is beautiful in Valinor, everything is holy. It's got a big ass mountain to protect it where Manwë lives, and 2 beautiful trees that Yavanna makes, and Also, time begins at that point, or at least they start recording time from that point. It's a bit hard to fathom a time before time began, so anyway, I'll leave that to the Valar. But yeah, apart from Valinor sounding very beautiful and alluring, and I'd love to visit it, I think Middle-earth would be far more interesting. So meanwhile, Middle-earth is festering, with Melkor roaming around and moping. He wielded cold and fire in many shapes, power and fear, from the tops of mountains to the deep furnaces that are beneath him. It's a very cool image of him just like like sending a child to their room, and then the child just makes everything in the room messy. That is what he's doing to Middle-earth at the moment. I believe Middle-earth is also broken down. So yeah, Middle-earth broke down the middle, and now we have these two different land masses. So we have now the east and the west. And the Valar kind of don't do anything about the eastern part now, where Middle-earth is. They kind of just put a band-aid on the festering wound and continue to put more band-aids on and fortify themselves. They just forgot about Melkor again, because this is not going to repeat itself. The evil is gone, right? They still can't fathom that things are going to be a problem, but at this point, there's some interesting things that we get as we talk about Valinor. So we find out that Aule, interesting note here. So Aule, he wrought there in Valinor many beautiful things, both openly and in secret. In secret? Secret from who, Aule? The Valar? What are you doing, you naughty boy? So I don't know what he's doing there. We also find out that Aule is loved by the Noldor, and I can see on the back of this copy, the Noldor is one of the 3 branches that come off the Eldar, as well as the Vanya, who seem to like Manwë, and the Teleri, who I've not come across yet, and then the separate section for Avari. Anyway, so Noldor and the Vanya. I like it how it says, poetry is the delight of Manwë, and the song of words, his music. I love that. I really like that the Vanya also loved that, and I probably would have been a Vanya now that I think about it, and all of you too as well, because if you like literature and beautiful words, you probably might have been a descendant of the Vanya. But feel free to disagree with me. I still don't know what I'm talking about. We'll get to that. I will learn about the other types of elves, and then we'll get there. And it's at this point that everyone is reminded of Ulmo, who's always there, and just like the typical kind of true neutral character who is all this power but will never really use it because he's true neutral. So Ulmo, it is specifically said that there are parts of Utumno and Middle-earth that Manwë and Vada can't get to because it's so well protected by Melkor, so deep into the ground or whatever. But there is water down there, so technically the echo of that music runs through all veins of the world in sorrow and in joy. For if joyful is the fountain that rises in the sun, its springs are in the well of sorrow, unfathomless at the foundations of the earth. Oh my god, what a beautiful image. So this is the image of the reach of the water of Ulmo, he's solidly just kind of pissed off from the rest of the world, but is ever present in the deepest, darkest depth. But what a beautiful image that, Ulmo there is water down in Utumno somewhere, and he's present in that water. I'm so excited to come back and read the Silmarillion already, even though I've only read like 3 chapters, because there's going to be a lot of reread value, I think, especially if I read some other parts of Tolkien too. So, and the other thing is that all the other Valar kind of just forgot about and gave up on Middle-earth to a point. Ivana she's kind of grating on my nerves a bit, Ivana, to be honest, but I don't know why. Maybe it's just because she's like nature and chaos, and sometimes those sorts of people, like druids, they kind of just annoy me. But she kind of does have a little bit of drive. She goes back to Middle-earth and tries to like water the plants and because she misses them, and she's like, it's like when you drive back past your old house and all of the trees are dead, she's just like trying to water them, and then she gets annoyed because she can't, and she goes back to everyone else and is like, we have to do something. Occasionally Orome like, goes on a little bit of a killing spree, but doesn't really do much, just like a reminder. But everyone else is kind of just like, there's no point. Except for Ulmo. It says here, no, to all those who were lost in that darkness or wandered far from the light of the Valar, the ear of Ulmo was ever open. Nor has he ever forsaken Middle-earth, and whatsoever may since have befallen of ruin or of change, he has not ceased to take thought of it, and will not until the end of days. And that is so beautiful. So even people who have turned fully to evil, Ulmo is like, I'm still here and I am open to you changing. And it is so incredibly in character that he is just so great. So great. See, I take it back. Ulmo is the person who should be going to reason with Melkor, because he's just kind of like, you can come back if you want. This is the reality. This is what you're gonna get at the most. But then he's not gonna, because he doesn't care, he's not actually gonna do that. So then the children of Ilúvatar come, and they are, so Ilúvatar is like sitting back. Long term, it's said that after the departure of the Valar, there was silence, and for an age, Ilúvatar sat alone in thought. So he's just like, it's really quiet, I'm bored, let's make the children. So he makes the Quendi, who are elves, and the Atani, who are men. We don't get mention of dwarves or hobbits or other creatures. I'm assuming orcs weren't his creation and orcs were Melkor's creation, but I do not know for sure. And he made them very different. Sorry, for elves, they were to bring forth and conceive of beauty, and for men, he gave them a new gift, and that gift was that they should seek beyond the world and should find no rest therein. So basically he implanted within the heart of every single breathing human an existential crisis. and calls it a gift. And is it a gift? It says here, they should have a virtue to shape their life amid the powers and chances of the world, beyond the music of the Ainur, which is as fate to all things else. And so basically everything else is within the music of the Ainur, but men are sort of free from that, free to stray and do bad things. And that's why a lot of them, I know, went to darkness, but also free to do even greater things. So it's this double-edged sword. Free to make their purpose and make their own destiny, I think, is the bottom line of it. And that is coupled with the fact that they're mortal, so they might not ever get there. So this is the constant existential crisis. It's the myth of Sisyphus all over again. Men, being set amid the turmoils of the powers of the world, would stray often and would not use their gifts in harmony. But he said, these two in time shall find all that they do redounds at the end only to the glory of my work. So it was within Ilúvatar's vision that men stray as far or as not far as he wants. So that's humans are the change bringers of the world. They are the beating heart, and the elves, the Ainur, are the backdrop. And elves never die. Not only are they immortal, but if they die or are slain from trauma, they get reborn, so they're truly immortal. It's unclear exactly with my reading here if they are reborn in the same form or a different form, but they are gathered in the halls of Mandos in Valinor, whence they may in time return, so they do come back. But the sons of men die and they do not come back. Where they go, no one knows except Ilúvatar, if he knows it all. Death is their fate, and that is their gift. And that is something that all of the powers will envy. And it kind of pisses Melkor off because Ilúvatar not revealing what he purposes for the elves after the world's end. And then there's something here I don't quite get, and that is that the Valar declare actually that men will end up joining the second music of the Ainur, whereas Ilúvatar has not revealed what he purposed for the elves after the world's end. So after the world's end, there is an end apparently, the men go to the second music, but the elves we don't know, and Melkor has not discovered it either. which definitely is going to piss him off even more. The word poignant is used, I think, with regards to the years lengthening and becoming more sorrowful for the elves. It's just something that I cannot imagine, being sorrowful about having more life. No, I can logically conceive of that happening, but I suppose if you're a different species, it must be very different. I think a human living forever might be a very different thing to an elf living forever. The elves are like mini Ainur, but just not as powerful, which is kind of like, okay, you've just created new things that are inferior to the product of the Ainur. So Ilúvatar has the same desire to control as Melkor does, the exact same, but just with non-maleficence. Like, he doesn't actually want to harm his creations super directly, only indirectly. I just find it so amusing that Tolkien's talking about men getting strange gifts from Ilúvatar, and like, we're talking about our own species and trying to like make sense of all of that feeling we get inside of ourselves about the things we want to do in our life, the progress we want to do, the stuff we want to experience, combined with the fact that we are going to be old and die, and be unable to do a lot of the stuff that we want to for various reasons, and a lot of them unfair. And he's taking that and trying to make it make sense in the Silmarillion by saying that it is a gift. And sure, it is a gift, by saying that it's a gift and that there is a greater purpose of which we don't really know. But the reason that we feel so torn between and have this sense of free will is because we were given that. I can definitely see how this ties into Tolkien's religiosity, and it's very fascinating and very interesting to think about. It certainly feels like we have that feeling of free will because we, you know, as Tolkien says, we have the virtue to shape our life amid the powers and chances of the world. And I could probably be a little bit more eloquent and succinct in what I'm saying, but I've just finished reading the chapter and had to blurt my thoughts out. So I wouldn't forget them. I am excited to read on, and I will see you in the next chapter. There's just so much beautiful language in this chapter though. I really want to go back and read it and absorb it all, but I think it would be better if I waited to read it once I have more context and have read the rest of everything. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I should just read every chapter twice before I go on. I don't know.